Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to sit back and just imagine for a moment that you and I are sitting on the edge of this shaded, ancient communal courtyard.
Right on the planet Antaran.
Exactly. The air around us is dry, but it's very calm. The architecture isn't imposing at all. It's seamlessly woven right into the desert landscape.
Just curved gently to catch the wind.
Yeah, and life is moving quietly around us. It's unhurried, deliberate. You get this profound sense that everyone here is just deeply attuned to the natural rhythms of a world that, well, quite frankly, once almost died.
It's a remarkably peaceful vantage point to take.
It really is. And today our mission is to explore a fascinating archival record from the Orion saga. Specifically, we are opening up PDF 012.
Which is such a vital document.
It is, because it preserves the most intimate day-to-day aspects of the Antaran civilization. It's how they live behind closed doors, so to speak.
Well, before we dive into the specifics of this document, you have to remember the crucible that forged the Antarana as a people. If you look back at the earlier records from 1 to 11, you see a civilization shaped entirely by the near collapse of their homeworld.
Right, they went through a massive bottleneck.
They did, and they didn't survive that bottleneck through brute force or by trying to conquer their environment. They survived by internalizing a profound doctrine of equilibrium, consensus, and absolute restraint.
And the question this particular archive answers is how those massive planetary survival strategies trickle down into the living room.
Precisely.
Because it's one thing to say, oh, we manage our water and our cities with perfect ecological balance. But okay, let's unpack this. How does a society so completely dedicated to cosmic and ecological equilibrium handle the messy, unpredictable, fiercely intimate aspects of life?
Like falling in love.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or what happens when a couple breaks up. Or the incredibly daunting, often chaotic task of raising children.
What's fascinating here is that the Antarana view individuals fundamentally differently than we instinctively do.
How so?
Well, in our cultures, even subconsciously, there is a lot of language around possession. My partner, my child. For the Antarana, no person is viewed as a possession. Every single individual is seen as an autonomous being in a state of continuous becoming.
Continuous becoming. I love that phrasing.
It's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
In their intimate lives, the very concept of ownership has been completely replaced by the concept of responsibility.
I want to stop you right there, actually, because that sounds lovely in theory. But human nature, and presumably Antarana nature, involves attachment.
But of course.
So if there is no ownership, what does an actual relationship look like? Let's look at how two individuals come together. The archive makes it very clear there's no concept of marriage.
Not at all.
No formal vows, no lifelong legal binding where you swear to a distant future. So if they don't bond through an obligation or a contract, how do they actually end up together? Do they just bump into each other in the courtyard and say, hey, we're a couple now?
It is a bit more intentional than that. They bond through what the archive translates as mutual perception and inner alignment.
Inner alignment. Meaning what exactly?
In practice, it means their unions are built on resonance. Two people might find themselves working on the same agricultural terrace or participating in the same communal planning group, and they notice their rhythms simply align.
They just click.
They do. They complement each other's equilibrium. But there is absolutely no societal pressure demanding that this alignment be formalized into a permanent structure.
So there isn't that ticking clock we have. You know, that pressure of we've been dating for 2 years, we need to move in together, get a mortgage, and lock this down.
Exactly. Because that pressure is absent, there is incredible fluidity. Partnerships might be brief, or they might span centuries.
Centuries. Wow.
Yeah. A couple might choose to transition into a shared living space, which keep in mind is communally owned, so there's no stress over property rights. Mm-hmm. Or they might remain in entirely separate dwellings while still maintaining a deeply committed bond.
Which brings up a huge question. If they don't have that structural glue holding them together, no mortgage, no legal marriage, what happens when things go south?
You mean separations?
Yeah, surely someone gets their heart broken. You can't tell me two beings just high-five and walk away when a long-term relationship ends.
Well, the archive doesn't suggest they are immune to sadness.
Yeah.
But the mechanics of a breakup are entirely different because the underlying philosophy is different. Mm-hmm. The archive contains this incredible maxim: duration is not a measure of value.
Duration is not a measure of value. I just want you to let that sink in for a second. Think about how heavily we weigh the success of a relationship by its longevity.
We really do.
If someone gets divorced after 10 years, society often frames it as a failed marriage.
But for the Antarana, the length of the bond doesn't dictate its worth. When that inner alignment shifts and people do change, that's the continuous becoming part.
Right.
Separation is simply the acknowledgement of a changed resonance. It means the equilibrium between those two people can no longer be sustained.
So mechanically, how does that work? Is there a big dramatic move-out day?
Not usually. Because they don't share private financial assets or legal constraints, a separation is often just a quiet decoupling of daily routines.
Just a fade out.
Yes, and there is no blame attached to it. There is no social sanction or gossip in the courtyard. It is an entirely peaceful dissolution. They secure their emotional bonds through mutual respect rather than through control or coercion.
And you don't hold on to someone just because you're afraid of being alone, because the wider community is always there.
Exactly. You are never truly isolated.
It's like they've completely removed the friction of logistics from the pain of a breakup. You're just left with the natural transition of the relationship. But wait, this lack of ownership has to get incredibly complicated when we introduce kids into the mix.
Yes, parenthood.
Because that biological pull to protect and own your offspring is arguably its strongest force in nature. How do they view new life?
The birth of an Antaran child is not seen as the creation of property, nor is it a legacy to carry on a family name. The archive states explicitly that the child belongs neither to the parents nor to the community.
It belongs solely to itself.
Entirely to itself, yes.
Okay, but logistically, a newborn can't belong to itself. It needs someone to feed it. So who is actually doing the heavy lifting in those early years? Are the biological parents just completely hands off?
No, the biological parents are absolutely vital. They are the primary caretakers during those fragile earliest years. They form the child's foundational life environment.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the distinction is that they hold no exclusive claim to shaping the child's identity. They are not expected or even encouraged to mold the youth into a miniature version of themselves. Parenthood is a relationship you cultivate, not a mechanism of control.
You walk beside them.
Yes, the parents accompany the child. They don't direct their ultimate destination.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the biological parents aren't the sole owners of the child's future, they also aren't left alone to bear the entire exhausting burden of raising them.
Which changes everything.
Let's be real, parenting is exhausting. But in Antaran society, from the moment of birth, there is this active, deeply ingrained communal involvement. We are talking about unrelated adults, neighbors, elders. Everyone in that shaded courtyard is naturally keeping an eye out.
It is what the records refer to as the living web, and it is a brilliant distribution of care. Imagine a toddler having a meltdown over a dropped toy.
Oh, I can imagine.
In many human societies, the parent feels immense pressure to quiet the child immediately, feeling judged by onlookers, perhaps reacting out of stress.
Oh, absolutely. The classic grocery store tantrum where you're just sweating, hoping nobody is judging your parenting skills.
Right. But in the Antaran courtyard, an elder or a neighbor might simply step in, calmly redirect the child's attention, or just sit with them until the frustration passes.
And the parents are okay with that.
Completely. The biological parent doesn't feel threatened or undermined by this because they don't view the child's behavior as a reflection of their personal property or success as a parent.
That is such a relief to even think about.
By creating this living web, the society distributes the responsibility of child rearing without diluting the emotional attachment. No single adult is asked to carry the full crushing weight of a child's continuity.
It's wild to think about. Giving up the illusion of total control over your kid actually buys you an entire village of genuine support. And if you look closely, this intimate practice perfectly mirrors their broader social order.
It really does.
In the earlier records, we saw how the Antarana rely on decentralized, consensus-based structures to run their infrastructure. No single leader makes all the decisions. They apply that exact same decentralized architecture to raising their young.
It's a seamless integration of their macro and micro philosophies. And as the child grows and requires more specific guidance, they transition from the general care of the living web to a very unique societal institution.
The mentor.
Yes, the mentor. I was reading this section of the archive and trying to figure out if this is basically just a school teacher or a godparent. What is the actual function of an Antaran mentor? And why not just let the biological parents handle this phase? Biological parents are considered too close to the subject. They have established rhythms with the child that might actually prevent the youth from discovering new aspects of themselves.
They have blind spots, basically.
Exactly. So early in the youth's life, a designated mentor is assigned. The selection process is meticulous. It has nothing to do with lineage or familial wealth. The assignment is based purely on suitability and inner alignment.
So they're matching personalities, essentially.
Yes, and quite frequently, the mentor comes from an entirely different functional caste or age cohort.
Let's clarify that term for a second. When the archive says functional caste, it's not a rigid hierarchy where one caste is better than another, right?
Correct. Their society has no hierarchical power structures. A functional caste simply refers to groups dedicated to specific societal maintenance. You might have one caste focused on atmospheric monitoring, another on agricultural yields or water reclamation.
So the mentor often comes from a different field than the parents to expose the child to new ways of thinking and contributing.
Precisely. The goal is to provide a guide who resonates with the youth's specific emerging nature.
So what does the actual mentoring look like? Because the archive says they don't rule through authority. They aren't standing at the front of a classroom lecturing with a chalkboard.
No, definitely not.
They offer guidance through example active listening and something called calibrated challenges. Give me an example of a calibrated challenge.
Let's say a mentor takes a youth out to a moisture reclamation farm on the edge of the desert. A calibrated challenge isn't giving them a textbook about water condensation. It's asking the youth to monitor a delicate pressure valve for the day.
Okay, hands-on experience.
Exactly. And if the valve starts to fail, the mentor doesn't rush in and fix it for them, nor do they yell at them for failing. They stand back and ask questions. What do you notice about the pressure? How does the wind affect the temperature here?
They let them sweat it out a little bit, but in a completely safe environment?
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the mentor's true function is to convey attitude rather than dogma.
Attitude over dogma.
Yes, they support the child's capacity for self-reflection and perception. By offering these calibrated challenges, the mentor ensures that the youth learns to navigate the complexities of the world based on their own internal balance, rather than relying on external commands.
There is a line from the archive regarding their educational philosophy that I highlighted multiple times. Questions are considered more valuable than answers.
It is the bedrock of their long arc of early formation. The Antaran are incredibly patient. Knowledge is offered, but it is never imposed. Children learn through observation, imitation, and guided experience over many years.
Which is a huge contrast to the anxiety we often see here. Think about the pressure on teenagers to pick a college major to decide the trajectory of their entire professional lives by the time they're 18.
It's immense.
What happens if an Antaran youth just doesn't know what they want to do?
Nothing happens. And that is the beauty of it. That philosophy of questioning naturally delays any sort of rigid role assignment. The Antaran deliberately avoid early fixation.
They give them room to breathe.
Children are given an immense expanse of time to explore different activities. True ability and vocation must arise from personal insight, not societal expectation.
Okay, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. Teenagers.
Nice.
Exploring activities is great, but young people are hormonal, emotional, and highly reactive. If this society is so obsessed with calm, rational equilibrium, do they just suppress all their feelings? Are we looking at a society of stoic robots?
Not at all. Their emotions are deeply felt, but they are highly contextualized. Emotional shaping is a massive part of their upbringing.
So they don't ignore the feelings.
No children are taught to perceive their feelings, to sit with them, and to name them accurately. Most importantly, they are taught not to act on those feelings unreflected.
So when a youth gets furiously angry because conflicts definitely arise, what happens? Are they punished for breaking the peace of the courtyard?
No, they are accompanied through the conflict. To understand this, we have to touch briefly on a concept from the earlier records, the flame.
Right. The flame, this is the planetary core energy that literally keeps their cities running.
Exactly. It's geothermal, it's powerful, and it's essential for their survival. But they know that drawing too heavily on the flame causes ecological instability.
It throws off the planetary balance.
Yes. They respect its limits entirely without mystification. They don't worship the flame. They revere the balance it requires. Reverence replaces adoration. Now they apply that exact same logic to their internal emotional landscape.
Ah, I see. So an unchecked fit of rage is treated like over-extracting from the planetary core. It's inherently destabilizing.
Yes, perfectly stated. A mentor will sit with an angry youth and help them recognize that their emotional limits and the planet's ecological limits are part of the exact same system of balance.
That's profound.
You are allowed to feel the heat of the anger just as you use the heat of the flame. But you do not let it burn the city down. You do not let it harm the community.
So what does this all mean? When you zoom out and look at the whole picture, bonding based on resonance, the living web of the community, these incredibly patient mentors, and teaching kids to manage their anger like a delicate geothermal reactor. What is the end result of this upbringing?
The ultimate goal is not rapid achievement. It is certainly not conformity or obedience. The goal is independence, a profound sense of responsibility and deep inner balance.
They want fully formed individuals.
Yes. An Antarana youth is considered mature when they have learned to, as the archive beautifully phrases it, carry themselves in harmony with others. They must become a self-sustaining emotional ecosystem, one that adds to the balance of the community rather than draining it.
Carry themselves in harmony with others. Sitting here in our imaginary courtyard, looking at the way they live, it really forces you to take a step back and synthesize everything we've uncovered in this archival record.
It's a very coherent way of living.
It is. The Antarana's most intimate practices aren't just lovely, isolated ideals. They are the exact perfect reflection of their broader cultural survival strategy.
It is a flawless mirroring of macro and micro. A society that recognizes it cannot dominate its environment to survive eventually learns that it cannot dominate its own people either.
That makes perfect sense.
The restraint they show toward the planetary flame is the exact same restraint they show toward a partner whose resonance has shifted, or a child who is slowly, clumsily finding their own path in the courtyard.
Which brings this right back to you listening to this deep dive. When we look at this archival record, it asks us to reflect on the architecture of our own lives.
It really serves as a mirror.
Think about your own human relationships. How much of our anxiety and love, how much of our deep-seated panic when a relationship ends, or our stress in parenting comes from the illusion of ownership?
The fear of losing something we believe belongs to us.
Exactly. What if we tried to view our own relationships and the paths of the children in our lives as a continuous becoming rather than things we need to control and manage?
This raises an important question, and it is perhaps the most challenging thought the Antarana record leaves us with.
Let's hear it.
If a society entirely stops viewing its people, its partners, and its children as property to be managed and secured, does it lose the fiery driving passion that so often defines human connection? Or by giving up that illusion of control, does it finally free itself from the endless exhausting chaos of heartbreak and rebellion?
It is a quiet, monumental thought, one to sit with maybe in the shade long after this deep dive ends. Thank you for exploring the Orion saga with us, and for taking the time to unpack the wisdom of the Antarana. Until next time.